Turkey is emerging a winner in Syria, and this is really a no-brainer, guys. Anyone who has been really observing the geopolitical situation in the Middle East knows that Turkey has always had this aspiration to control the Levant, to control the Middle East, because, you know, Turkey used to be the big dog in the Middle East, used to be the biggest dog in the Middle East before the British dismantled it. The British and the Russians dismantled the Ottoman Empire during World War I, and really by the time of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was called the sick dog of Europe, and that was not for no reason. It was called the sick dog of Europe because it indeed was an empire at that point that was on its last and final leg. At that point, the Ottomans had already lost most of their European territories, and so they were really just hanging on to some hairs for survival. They were barely surviving, and the Russians and the Turks fought over the Caucasus, and the Russians vanquished the Turks. And so the Turks want to revive their empire. They are still feeling the humiliation of what happened during World War I, and they want that to end. They want to rise above the ashes of their past defeat. And so here they are. They are overrunning Syria. They have been controlling a section of Syria for years now. They entered Syria militarily back in 2016 when they commenced their first military operation. And they have had soldiers in a section of northern Syria ever since. And this was under the support of the United States government, the support of the Trump administration. And the Trump administration, and even the administration before Trump, the Obama administration, saw Turkey as a force for order in the Levant, in Syria specifically, because that's where much of the chaos has been taking place. And so Turkey has devised a plan, and the plan was topple Assad, cause enough chaos as possible, cause as much chaos as possible, and then use that chaos as a pretext by which to justify military deployment into Syria. The chaos has been being caused by groups like ISIS, and also you have the YPG, which is, from what I've heard, it's a Kurdish terrorist organization. Turkey has been at war with a Kurdish terrorist group called the PKK for years, and they've done terrorist attacks in Turkey, and so Turkey has said that Syria has been a main concentration zone for PKK activities, and so they put troops in northern Syria. And so Bashar al-Assad was backing, if I'm not mistaken, Bashar al-Assad was working with the Kurds who were enemies of Turkey. And Syria has not wanted, Bashar al-Assad did not want Turkey's military presence in northern Syria. Erdogan had some attempt of a negotiation with the Assad government, and they talked about possibly normalizing relations between Syria and Turkey. But the thing is that Bashar al-Assad said, listen, we can't have any sort of normalization if you have all these thousands of Turkish troops in my country. Understandably so. And Turkey said, well, we're not going to have any normalization. Now, if I had to make a guess, I would suspect that the Turks knew that the Syrians were going to reject normalization because they knew that the Syrians did not want Turkish troops in their country. And so the Turks had this sort of discourse with the Syrian government talking about how they wanted normalization, knowing that the Syrians would ask for the Turkish troops to withdraw from Syria. And by knowing that, they knew that the Syrians would not agree with Turkish military presence in their country, so that the Turks could say, well, we tried to reason with them, but they didn't want to reason with us, when the reality is that you knew damn well the Syrians would ask you to withdraw your soldiers from Syria, and you knew that you weren't going to do that, and you knew that you could then make the claim that the Syrians rejected their attempts at normalization. So here we are. Assad was toppled, Assad was overthrown, and now you have all these jihadist gremlins overrunning Syria, and it's a complete nightmare. You already have a lot of executions being done, and it's just an absolute nightmare. But this is exactly what the Turks wanted. Now the Turks have the green light to further enter Syria. And for a while, there's going to be this interim government in Syria, but I think eventually this is going to just be reduced to pieces. I think eventually there's going to be sectarian violence. There's already some sectarian violence already there. And I think there's going to be just a lot of bloodshed and chaos, and the Turks will be presented as the force of order in the land. So let's read on this article. This is from the Washington Post. It says here, talks about Khamenei, the Ayatollah of Iran. And it says here, Khamenei left out another country in his tirade that's arguably benefited far more from Assad's fall. Turkey, whose militant proxies have surged through Syria in recent days, is emerging as the outside power with the strongest hand in steering the country's political transition. On Thursday, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara, the Turkish capital. The meeting reflected the central role Turkey will play in the weeks to come. Lawmakers from Erdogan's ruling party have already taken Turkish businessmen on scouting missions to Syrian cities like Aleppo, where lucrative construction contracts may soon be on offer. Ooh, business, money. So Turkey doesn't only want to expand militarily, but they want to expand economically in that country, and they are there to reap the awards of victory, of conquest. Ankara is also encouraging more than 3 million Syrian refugees in Turkey to eventually return home when conditions permit. Now, we'll talk more about this in a little bit here, but we're going to talk more about this in the European context. In the Turkish context, we do see a lot of Syrians being very enthusiastic about leaving Turkey and going back to Syria. Now, a lot of Syrian refugees in Lebanon have also been enthusiastic about returning back to their home country. So the question is, why aren't the Syrian refugees in Europe more enthusiastic or as enthusiastic about leaving and going back to Syria as the Syrians are in Lebanon and Turkey? And I think the reason for that is because the Turks treat the Syrians like animals. That's the reason why. So you'll see videos about Syrians going by the droves trying to get out of Turkey and Lebanon and go back to Syria. And then you see videos talking about Syrian refugees in Germany, and the Syrian refugees in Germany are saying, well, we're going to wait and we may want to stay in Germany for now. Or, hey, we started businesses in Germany. We have families in Germany. We really don't want to leave. And so you ask yourself, well, how come the Syrian refugees in Germany are not as enthusiastic about going back to Syria as the Syrian refugees are in Lebanon or Turkey? And the reason for that, like I said, is because the Turks and the Lebanese treat the Syrians like animals. And I think the Turks are probably the worst culprits in this regard. The Turks have been quite racist towards the Syrians, and there was at least one case of a pogrom that I read about in which Turkish nationalists ransacked some Syrian businesses, and I think they lit at least one Syrian business on fire. I mean, it is pretty nasty stuff, and there have been actual murders that have occurred of Syrian refugees. So Turkey is one of the most racist countries in the world, and that really shows. A lot of hatred against Syrian refugees, and it has nothing to do with religion because technically, nominally speaking, they are the same religion. So what does it have to do with? It has to do with two different things, from what I understand. One is race and one is economics. So with the economic situation, Turkey's economy hasn't been very good, and the Turkish lira hasn't been very strong within recent years. And that makes for a lot of space for scapegoating. Anytime you have really bad economic situations, you will always have scapegoating. This has been a fact of human society going all the way back since however far back you can go. I need some coffee because these streams take a lot of energy out of you, and I'm going to be talking for about 5 hours straight, so I need all the calories I can get. So far, I've been talking for around 20 minutes, so it's a good start. But anytime you have serious or harsh economic conditions, you will always have scapegoating, and the people who become the biggest scapegoats are foreigners, refugees, immigrants, and they will be blamed for the problems or the economic problems of that society. They will be blamed for the grievances, the economic grievances of that society, or really just the grievances in general. After World War I, the problems of Germany were blamed on the Jews and blamed on other people as well, but for the most part, they were blamed on the Jews. And so Turkish nationalists have had no qualms with blaming the Syrian refugees for the economic problems in Turkey, and that hatred is still there. The Turks want them to leave, and they have made it quite clear for years now that they do not like the Syrians. So the Syrians don't mind leaving Turkey. Lebanese have also been quite hostile towards the Syrian refugees. From what I understand, there have been crimes done by some Syrians, and so this has gotten the Syrians to be put under a negative light and generalized, which is very common when you are a minority in a country. And, anytime a member of your minority group does something bad, that minority group is then generalized as bad. This is, you see this all over X, all over Twitter. And so there have been acts of violence against Syrians by Lebanese people in Lebanon. And so Syrians don't mind leaving Lebanon. It's not a very welcoming place. Just ask the Palestinians. They'll tell you about Sabra and Shatila. So the Germans are a lot nicer than the Lebanese and the Turks, at least for now. But the Germans have also shown that they don't want Syrians in their country either. And so this has sparked a major debate within Germany about whether or not the Syrian refugees should be deported now that Bashar al-Assad has been toppled, and the one who has been accused of being the cause of all of Syria's problems has been toppled, really. We'll get more into that later on in the stream because I have some material on that topic. So let's get right back to this article about the rise of Turkey in the Middle East, subsequent to the fall of Bashar al-Assad. On Thursday, Turkish spy chief Ibrahim Kalin appeared in Damascus for meetings with rebel leaders. Ooh, I wonder why. Ooh, it's because Turkey is behind it, or at least one of the major players behind it, and the rebels are simply Turkey's proxies, and that includes HTS. That includes Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is just an offshoot of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He was reportedly spotted being driven around by a top figure within ascendant Islamist faction, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, ISIS, and praying in the city's famous 8th century Umayyad mosque. That sounds like a declaration of conquest. When the Turks invaded Constantinople, one of the things that they did was and everyone who is Eastern Orthodox knows this, one of the things that they did was they forced the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Hagia Sophia, which was the major church in Constantinople, to be transformed into a mosque. And they stripped the church of all of its icons. They stripped the church. They denuded the Hagia Sophia of all of its Christian iconography. Because according to Islam, Christian icons are idols. It's idolatry. And Muslims are hardcore iconoclasts. They really are. Islam really is a continuation of a lot of the heresies that the church conquered, that the church got rid of centuries ago. Arianism, iconoclasm. You find these old heresies sort of accumulated together in a very bizarre amalgamation in the Islamic cult. So after the Turks took over Constantinople, the Turks put a muezzin, someone who does the call to prayer, in the Hagia Sophia Mosque. And that was a declaration of conquest. And I think this Turkish guy is doing a similar thing. It's not really the same because this is not they didn't pray in a church. This guy's praying in a mosque. But it seems like the idea of going into a country that you've just conquered and praying in some big mosque is sort of a sign of dominance. That's the impression that I'm getting here. And so it says here that this Turkish intelligence officer, Ibrahim Kalin, intelligence chief, he went into a famous 8th century mosque in Syria called the Umayyad Mosque, and he prayed there. And it says here that 10 years ago, Erdogan, in a scathing attack on the Assad regime and its massacres of Syrian civilians, vowed to one day pray in the courtyards of that mosque. And it looks like that's about to that's about to become a reality. Now, it is interesting, I will say. It kind of reminds me of what Mehmet III did, the Ottoman Sultan. He said that I will eventually go into Rome and I will make St. Peter's Basilica into stables for my horses. And I think Erdogan is speaking with the same sort of mentality that, I hate Syria so much that I will one day just go into their big mosque and I'm going to pray and blah, blah, blah. And it's all just a way of expressing domination. That's what this is. And so it says here that Erdogan was frustrated by Western governments that ruled out a repeat of the 2011 operations that led to the collapse of the Muammar Gaddafi dictatorship. So NATO really accelerated the downfall of Gaddafi by bombing Gaddafi's forces, thus giving air support to the NATO-backed rebels in Libya. And Erdogan wanted to see the same thing happen in Syria. He wanted to see NATO bombings in Syria. And eventually there was NATO bombings of Syria, but that was in the name of fighting ISIS. But Erdogan wanted to see a major NATO military operation in Syria to overthrow Assad, and he didn't get that. And so that made him very upset. Plus, he really, really did not like the fact that Russia did a military intervention in Syria in 2015 to help Bashar al-Assad defeat the insurgency that was getting close to overthrowing him. And so Russia really was the only reason why Assad was able to remain in power. That's the only reason why. It was Russia. Now, Iran did help, don't get me wrong, but Russia was the backbone of Syria. And so once Russia got bogged down in Ukraine and really could not be there efficiently to help Bashar al-Assad, then Bashar al-Assad had no choice really but to flee. And plus, Iran was cut off because Israel had defeated Hezbollah, and so Iran was crippled, and Bashar al-Assad really had lost all of his allies. So it's a very difficult situation, and it's a very crazy situation. Now, the thing is that, was there a deal done behind the curtains? I think there was some sort of a deal. We'll get more into that later, but I think there was definitely a deal between Israel, the United States, and Turkey, and Russia had a say-so in this deal as well, because Russia, from what I understand, Russia wanted to protect their military installations in Syria, and so they wanted to make sure that neither Israel nor the rebels would attack their military in Syria. And so they told Israel, listen, if you're going to be bombing Syria, don't be hitting our soldiers. And Israel made sure not to hit any of the Russian soldiers. So it says here, basically it talks about what I've been talking about for years now. It says here that in 2011, Erdogan, a religious nationalist, had tried to champion and cheerlead the pro-democracy uprisings that scorched through the Arab world. He touted his nation's model of democracy as an example for Arab states to follow, with visions of expanding Turkish soft power and influence. Ideologues in his government touted the Turkish leader's Neo-Ottoman bona fides. Now, this is not something that's made up. This is very, very real in the collective consciousness of Turkey. They really have this idea of reviving the Ottoman Empire. And this has been known for years. In fact, if you dig deep enough in the internet, it's kind of hard to find this story, but it is there. If you dig deep enough in an investigation of Erdogan, you will see that Erdogan, years and years ago, attended some sort of a big political event in which he was dressed up like Alp Arslan. Yeah. The Turkish military leader, the Seljuk Turkish military leader, who defeated the Byzantines in the Battle of Manzikert, I want to say in the year either 1072 or 1073. Fact check me on that one, but I'm pretty certain it was either, I want to say it was 1073 or 1072. One of those dates. But when the Byzantines lost that battle, that was the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. Now you'll say, well, that was the Seljuks, but the Ottomans were really a continuation of Seljukian power. The Ottomans were the descendants of the Seljuks. Who? What do you mean who? Alp Arslan or who? Erdogan was LARPing as Alp Arslan. And he wanted to celebrate the defeat of the Byzantines by Alp Arslan in the 1070s. Not the 1970s, the 1070s. So these people have this dream, and Erdogan LARPs as a sultan. And LARPing is a very real thing, and LARPing really is an indication of what someone wants to be. You know, when you see a woman dressed up like a witch, she probably has a fantasy about being a witch. That maybe that's the reason why she plays Elden Ring. And she plays as a witch. People dress up like the people that they want to be. You know, that's why they dress up in certain costumes. LARPing is exactly that. So, I mean, if Erdogan wasn't this big politician, if he was just a regular guy, you may see him in some festival somewhere in California, you know, with a kilt on, doing World of Warcraft LARPing. It says here that Erdogan had kept his options open, putting together a rebel force dubbed the Syrian National Army, they're terrorists, and tacitly supporting the jihadists that became Hayat Tahrir al-Sham terrorists, explained Stephen Cook and Sinan City, that's a weird last name, in foreign policy. The SNA was primarily a tool Turkey used to fight Syrian Kurds who wanted to set up a state on Turkey's doorstep. HTS was useful against the Russians and the regime, but Russian arms confined them to the Idlib province. So the Turks for years have been backing this group of terrorists called SNA, Syrian National Army, and as the article has said here, they also have been backing HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and they have been using these rebels as a proxy against the Kurds in northern Syria, and the Turks have done some pretty horrendous atrocities upon the Kurds, atrocities of the Kurds. So, for example, these Turkish proxies, these Syrian rebels, they have done sexual violence towards Kurds. They have kidnapped people for ransom money. They have also controlled the agricultural sector in this part of northern Syria, where Turkey has its military occupation, wherein they have cut down countless olive trees tended to by Kurdish farmers, owned by Kurdish farmers, and they will use the olive trees as firewood and export the firewood back to Turkey for profit. So they have been abusing the Kurdish farmers, and they have been abusing the Kurdish populace there, and they have been really trying to make that area into an extension of Turkey. And that's why Turkey controls the educational sector in that part of northern Syria. Turkey has forced everyone to use the Turkish lira, the Turkish currency. And also, if you want to start a business in that area of northern Syria, you have to register the business under the Ankara government. So it really is an extension of Turkish power. And within recent years, we have really seen the revival of Turkish power in the Levant, and we've seen this in this particular part of northern Syria. So that power, that control of Syria has just gotten a whole lot bigger because really Turkey is the main power player in Syria right now. I understand that Israel has been expanding. Israel has been expanding its border into Syria, so Israel wants to have some influence and power in Syria, and Turkey Turkey wants to be the main power player in Syria. So the question is, are the Turks and the Israelis going to come to some sort of a cooperation? Are they going to come to some sort of an agreement? Or is there going to be a clash? And I think eventually there's going to be a clash between Turkey and Israel. That's what I believe. and it may just be over control over Syrian territory, or it may just be that one day Turkey's going to say, okay, Israel, you can't have two big dogs in this neighborhood. There can only be one big dog, and I'm going to be that big dog. And that's what happens when you have two big power players in a region. They will always vie for power, and they will always vie for that position of being top dog. They will not stand for sharing power. So the Israelis and the Turks, I think, will eventually clash because they they do have antithetical interest. So I think eventually there's going to be a collision between the Jews and the Turks. And so it says here, today, with Assad gone, this balance of power has rapidly shifted in Erdogan's favor, wrote Gonul Tol, director of the Turkish program at the Middle East Institute. Not only does Russia's loss give Turkey freer reign in Syria, but it will also damage Moscow's standing in other places where the two countries compete for influence. And there's going to be some more competition over influence between Israel and Turkey. Right now, they have diplomatic ties, but I think that's going to deteriorate within the near future. On Thursday, in a separate move that seemed to reflect Erdogan's clout in Africa. Now, this is very interesting. Not a whole lot of people pay attention to Africa. But it says here, on Thursday, in a separate move that seemed to reflect Erdogan's clout in Africa, Turkey brokered a diplomatic breakthrough between Ethiopia and Somalia over the construction of a port in the breakaway republic of Somaliland. So the Turks are getting heavily involved in African politics, specifically East African politics, because East Africa is closer to the Arab world. Once you start, when you're in Nigeria and all that, that's sub-Saharan Africa. Once you start getting into Ethiopia, Somalia, North Sudan, once you start getting into that part of Africa, you have entered the Afro-Semitic world, the Afro-Arab world. And that part of Africa is not the same as the rest of Africa, or really the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, I should say, because that part of the world, that part of Africa is heavily influenced by Arab culture. So, and in the case of Sudan, I mean, they speak Arabic in Sudan. The Ethiopians speak a Semitic language, and the Somalians also, they speak a very weird dialect where there's a lot of Arab influence, but it's not exactly Arabic. But it definitely is an Afro-Semitic language. And fact check me on that one, but it's either that or they speak a dialect of Arabic that's very difficult to understand. Because my father has difficulty understanding Somalians. Sudanese, my dad has no problem. My dad can understand Sudanese people perfectly. But when it comes to Somalians, my dad has difficulty understanding them. He can pick up some words, but he doesn't really understand what they're trying to say. Eritrea, that's right. Eritrea is another Afro-Semitic country. So that part of Africa is quite close to Saudi Arabia. And once you start, so let's look at a map here. So if you look at a map, you'll see Sudan is right there, right across Saudi Arabia. Somalia is right across from Yemen. And the Turks, they have a score to settle with the Arabs. During World War I, the Arabs fought against the Ottomans, and with the help of the British, they defeated the Ottomans, and they overthrew Ottoman rule, and they kicked them out of Saudi Arabia. So if the Ottomans are going to want to revive the Ottoman Empire, well, Saudi Arabia is going to be a target. This is not speculation. You can look into this. The Arabs are terrified of a Turkish military presence in East Africa. Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, these countries. And Turkey has influence in Somalia. I believe Turkey has a military base in Somalia, if I'm not mistaken. And so when you hear about Turkey brokering diplomatic relations between Ethiopia and Somalia, Arabs don't like that. And that's one of the reasons why the UAE has been backing the RSF in Sudan. There's a horrific civil war that's ongoing in Sudan right now. So many people have been killed. I mean, it's the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world right now is Sudan. Not a whole lot of people talk about Sudan. There's more attention being given to the Middle East, but Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world right now. There is starvation and a lot of killing and a lot of rape and atrocities and just a whole bunch of war crimes being done. And there are two forces that are at war. You have the Sudanese government, which is being backed by Egypt. And then you have the RSF, which is being backed by the UAE. Now, the UAE has been getting gold from Sudan. There's a lot of gold in Sudan. But there's also a geopolitical factor that's involved in all this quagmire, that's involved in this nightmare. The geopolitical factor is that the UAE wants to have major geopolitical influence. The UAE has tons of money, and it has tons of money to spare, and they want to show the world that they can influence geopolitics around them. So they say, okay, there's a civil war in Sudan, we'll back the RSF, we'll get money, and we'll get that geopolitical clout that we're looking for. Turkey has not, from what I understand, Turkey, as far as I know, has not chosen a side in the Sudanese civil war, but Turkey has been trying to act as a peacemaker between the two factors, the two warring groups. But the Arabs want to make sure that their presence in Africa is there as a counterbalance against Turkish influence in East Africa. Because, as I said, the Arabs are terrified of the idea of Turkish presence in the Afro-Semitic part of Africa, the Arab or the Semitic part of Africa. Because what's right in between Saudi Arabia and Africa? The Red Sea. And so if Turkey has... You guys can't see my mouse. If Turkey has a presence in, let's say, Sudan, then that means Turkey would have a direct access right into Saudi Arabia through the Red Sea. And the Arabs are terrified of this. The Arabs are also terrified of the Ottoman. We're not there yet, but they are terrified of the Turks having a presence in Iraq, because from Iraq they can go right into Saudi Arabia. So the Arabs don't want to be surrounded. That's the thing. But I think this is eventually going to happen. Sudan was a big part of Nubia during ancient Egypt domination in Africa. Nubia was the best warrior at that time. Yeah, there's a lot of history between Egypt and Sudan. And yeah, you're right. You can go back to ancient Egypt and you can read about how the Egyptians viewed Sudan, and they had slaves from that area, but they also there was also a lot of religious influence that came from Sudan towards ancient Egypt. The ancient Sudanese or Hamites or Nubians, they had a lot of religious influence on the ancient Egyptians. To Iran, this could look like a reconstruction of the Ottoman Empire's hold over the Caucasus and Levant that Iran grappled with between the 16th and 20th centuries, wrote Vali Nasser, a professor of international affairs at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies. A very interesting observation: the Caucasus and the Levant, amazingly, Turkey has been heavily involved in the South Caucasus. That's why the Turks backed the Azeris to defeat the Armenians. And what do you know? The Armenians are people who were genocided by the Turks, and now the Turks are at war with the Armenians through their proxy, Azerbaijan. So it doesn't take much to understand that the Turks want to resume from where they left off. So the Turks have a lot of influence in the South Caucasus, and the Turks also want to construct a railway system. What they envision is a railway system basically going right through Armenia. But the Armenians, they don't like the Turks, and the Armenians basically would be a hindrance towards Turkish hegemony. So the Turks want to remove that obstacle. Armenia is sort of this speed bump. If you look at a map, you'll see of Turkey, and then from Turkey you go to Nakhchivan, Armenia, Azerbaijan. From Azerbaijan, you go right into the Caspian Sea, And from there, you go into Central Asia, which was the motherland of the Turkish race. The Seljuks, who would be the forerunners of the Ottoman Empire, they came from Turkmenistan. They came from Central Asia. And so Erdogan has this vision of not only controlling the Middle East, but controlling Central Asia. That's why he formed his own Turkic NATO. Funny enough, Hungary is the secretary country of that union, because the Hungarians have this ideology of pan-Turanianism. But sometimes it's difficult to keep your train of thought during these streams. I don't know why that is, but the Turks, they want that direct access into the Caspian Sea. And so they really want to neutralize Armenia's autonomy. And that's why they took Nagorno-Karabakh, and you'll say, well, Nagorno-Karabakh was and still is internationally recognized as Azerbaijan. That's true, but the Turks don't want to stop at Nagorno-Karabakh. Not too long after the Turks took Nagorno-Karabakh from the Armenians in 2020, the Azeris did a military incursion into mainland Armenia, and they proceeded to kill over 200 Armenians, most of whom were Armenian military. And that was a sign. That was a sign of Turkey's aspirations of controlling all of Armenia. Turkey wants to control all of Armenia so that it can have that direct access through Armenia into Azerbaijan, into the Caspian Sea. And then from the Caspian Sea, it can go right into Kazakhstan. And from Kazakhstan, it can take all of Kazakhstan's natural resources. Now, they're already getting oil or natural gas from Kazakhstan, but they want that direct access, I think, without the hindrance of Armenia being in the way. These jokers over here. We got these jokers. Got these Muslim gremlins. So it says here, Turkey emerges as a big winner in the wake of al-Assad's ouster. It says here that in the messy aftermath of the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, many questions remain about the country's future. But one thing is clear, Turkey has emerged as a winner with more influence than ever over the rebels who now control most of Syria. So this is basically saying the same thing that the Washington Times article said. Turkey has all of this power through its Syrian rebel proxies. And it says here, Asel Aydin Taspas, a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, he said, Syria may not have a smooth transition and there may be renewed fighting between factions. But what is incontestable is that Turkey's influence will only grow economically and politically. And this is very true. You know, this is very, very, very true. Turkey is going to control Syria. That's just the bottom line. And look at this. I mean, Erdogan and Assad were friends. You know, they went on vacation together one time. And then Erdogan, not only did he backstab this guy, he overthrew him, almost had him killed. Turkey also became the main interlocutor with HTS. The group is designated a terrorist organization. Yeah, it's ISIS, terrorist, by Turkey, the United States, and European nations because of its history of Islamist extremism. But the Turks found a way to work with them and now have enormous leverage through that connection. Out of all the region's major players, Ankara has the strongest channels of communication and history of working with the Islamist group now in charge in Damascus, positioning it to reap the benefits of the Assad regime's demise. And it says here, it also channeled humanitarian aid and trade into the region, which helped HTS gain legitimacy among the people of the region. So they're trying to make the terrorists look good. Turkey's taking power. It's the revival of the Ottoman Empire. I mean, this is it's very plain. It's right there in plain view.